The Korean Mafia boss's triplets wouldn't stop screaming on the train until the black single mother did the unthinkable. If you love dark romance, stories of forbidden love, dangerous men, and unthinkable sacrifices, hit that subscribe button now. You won't want to miss what happens next. The sound was apocalyptic. 3 infants, their cries synchronized like a symphony of suffering, pierced through the private executive cabin of the Amtrak Acela Express. Every wail echoed off the polished wood paneling, amplified by the confined luxury. Passengers in neighboring cars shifted uncomfortably, grateful for the smoked glass partition that separated them from the chaos. But inside that cabin, Lee Dong-wook, the man they called the Reaper, was drowning. He sat rigid in the leather seat, his custom-tailored black suit creased for the first time in his life. The fabric that usually made him look like death's most elegant envoy now felt like a straitjacket. His jaw was clenched so tight he tasted copper. Those coal-black eyes, the ones that had watched empires crumble without flinching, now held something foreign, something that terrified him more than any rival ever could. Raw, unfiltered panic. 6-week-old Jae-hoon thrashed in his arms, tiny fists battering against his father's chest. Beside him in the custom triple stroller, Jae-min and Jae-kyung screamed in harmony, their faces flushed and desperate. 3 sons, 3 heirs to the Juk-yum-jo syndicate, 3 motherless children who refused every bottle, every pacifier, every attempt at comfort. 1 week. It had been 1 week since Hana's fever had stolen her away, leaving Dong-wook, a man who controlled 2 continents, utterly incapable of soothing his own children. The doctors had warned him about dehydration, about failure to thrive, about the very real possibility that his sons were starving to death in his arms. Sir. Kang, his chief enforcer, leaned close from the doorway, voice barely audible over the screaming. We're 30 minutes from the D.C. exchange. Hanjun's people will be waiting. Dong-wook didn't look up. His thumb traced the soft cheek of Jae-kyung, whose skin had gone pale, whose cries were weakening into something worse: resignation. I know the schedule, Kang. If the babies are still, then the contract means nothing. His voice was silk wrapped around steel. You don't hand over territory with 3 dead children in your arms. The train raced south through the American landscape, but inside the cabin, time was running out. The triplets' cries were a beacon, advertising vulnerability louder than any intercepted phone call. Hanjun was waiting for weakness, and Dong-wook was delivering it on a silver platter. He'd tried everything: 5 different formulas, bottles warmed to precise temperatures, lullabies in Korean that Hana used to sing. Nothing worked. His hands, steady enough to sign execution orders, trembled as he rocked Jae-hoon against his chest. The Reaper, they called him. The man who'd built an empire on calculated violence and ice-cold precision. But empires meant nothing when you couldn't keep 3 tiny humans alive. 3 rows away, separated by a smoked glass partition, Cleopatra Jones felt her body betray her. The crying hit her like a physical blow. Her breasts ached with sudden, painful tightness, milk letting down in response to the desperate infant screams that filled the cabin. She pressed a hand against her chest, feeling the dampness seep through the nursing pads she still wore. 6 months. 6 months since she'd needed them. 6 months since she'd held her daughter. Cleopatra closed her eyes, forcing down the wave of grief that always came with that phantom response. Grace. Her beautiful, perfect Grace, whose tiny heart had simply stopped beating one November night. No warning, no goodbye. Just the cold, clinical words: sudden infant death syndrome. She'd been on her way home from a grief counseling conference in New York, trying to stitch together the shattered pieces of her life. She was a nurse, an ER nurse, who'd seen every kind of trauma, but she hadn't been able to save her own child. Hadn't even known there was anything to save. The crying intensified, and Cleopatra's training kicked in before her grief could stop her. She knew that sound. The desperate, primal wail of an infant who needed something bottles couldn't provide. That wasn't discomfort or gas or tiredness. That was starvation. She turned in her seat, peering through the smoky glass. The man holding the baby was striking sharp cheekbones, ink-black hair styled with precision, a suit that screamed power and money, but his perfect facade was cracking. She could see it in the rigid set of his shoulders, the tremor in his hands, the way his eyes darted between the 3 crying infants with something close to desperation. And then she saw the smallest baby's face. Pale, too pale. The weak batting of tiny fists against the bottle being offered. The cry that was starting to fade into something more dangerous: silence. Cleopatra's hands gripped the armrests. Her body knew what those babies needed. Her breasts ached with the answer. Her milk against all medical logic was still there, still responding to infant cries 6 months after Grace's death. as if her body had been waiting for this moment. "Miss?" A flight attendant paused beside her, noticing her distress. "Are you all right?" Cleopatra looked at the woman, then back toward the executive cabin. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane. She didn't know that man, didn't know those babies. The bodyguards flanking the cabin door looked like they could break her in half without breaking a sweat. But she was a nurse, and those babies were dying. "I need to help," she heard herself say, already unbuckling her seatbelt. "I'm a nurse. Those babies, they're starving." The attendant's expression shifted between relief and uncertainty. The passenger has been quite firm about not wanting. Then he's going to watch his children die. Cleopatra stood, smoothing down her simple denim jacket over her tank top. She looked nothing like the polished, powerful people in that executive cabin, but she had something they didn't. She had exactly what those babies needed to survive. And as she walked toward the smoked glass door, her body still responding to their cries, Cleopatra Jones made a choice that would unravel her carefully controlled grief and thrust her into the most dangerous world she'd never imagined. She was about to do the unthinkable, and nothing, not her past, not her fear, not the cold-eyed man waiting on the other side of that door would ever be the same. The glass door slid open, and Cleopatra stepped into another world. The executive cabin was dark mahogany and butter-soft leather, amber lighting casting shadows across surfaces that gleamed with wealth. The air smelled of expensive cologne, baby formula, and desperation. Every head turned. 2 bodyguards straightened, hands moving toward weapons, but Cleopatra's eyes locked on the man in the center of chaos, Lee Dong-wook. Even drowning in panic, he was devastating. Sharp jaw clenched, black hair falling across his forehead, suit jacket open over a white shirt with undone buttons. Those coal dark eyes cut to her like a blade. "Out." His voice was silk over razor wire. "This is a private cabin." Cleopatra didn't move. Her gaze traveled over 3 infants, faces red with tears. The smallest had stopped crying hard. Movements sluggish. Dehydration. "Your sons are starving," she said steadily. "Whatever you've tried isn't working." His jaw tightened. "What could you possibly offer that I haven't tried?" "I'm an ER nurse from Detroit." She stepped closer, worn denim creaking against the luxury. "They need their mother, warmth, skin contact, and they need breast milk." She paused. "I have it." The cabin went silent. Dong-wook stared, really looked at her. His gaze traveled over her face, warm brown skin, natural coils, shadows of grief beneath her eyes. "You have no infant with you." "Not anymore." Her voice cracked. "Grace died 6 months ago. SIDS. My body never understood she was gone." Understanding flickered across his features. One parent's nightmare recognizing another's. "You would do this?" His voice dropped, rough. "You understand what you're offering?" "I'm offering to save their lives." She moved closer. "What you can't give them, no matter how powerful you are." The baby in his arms let out a weak wail. "Let me help them," she whispered. "Please." Dong-wook stood slowly, violence contained in expensive fabric. "If you do this, there will be consequences. I don't care about your world. I care about 3 suffering babies." Something flickered in his eyes. Then, in profound surrender, he held out his son. "His name is Jae-hoon. Save him." Cleopatra took the baby with steady hands. She sat, shrugged off her jacket, adjusted her tank top with practiced efficiency. When she brought Jae-hoon to her breast, he latched immediately. Relief overwhelmed her. His desperate suckling gentled, tiny fists uncurling as nourishment flowed. The crying stopped. The silence was sacred. When she looked up, Dong-wook stared with molten intensity. Ice melted into something unguarded. "The others," she said softly. He brought her Jae-kyung, then Jae-min. Each latched desperately, and he watched, gaze tracing her shoulder, her throat. Hunger that wasn't his son's, something darker. When the last baby slept, Dong-wook sank across from her. "I've tried everything since their mother died. Nothing worked. I built an empire but couldn't feed my children." "You kept them alive," she corrected gently. "That matters." His eyes snapped to hers, surprised. "You saved them. In my culture, a woman who nurses a widower's children binds herself to them, to their father. You've done something sacred, Cleopatra Jones." Her name on his lips made her shiver. "I'm a nurse doing my job." "No." His stare pinned her. "You did what only you could, and now you're mine." The train slowed. D.C. lights approached. "What happens now?" Dong-wook stood, buttoning his jacket, restoring armor. Now I keep you safe. What you did made you the most valuable person in my world. And the most vulnerable." He extended his hand, offer and warning. Cleopatra looked at his hand. His sleeping sons. The door leading back to emptiness. She took his hand. His fingers closed, warm and sure. Thumb brushing her knuckles like a brand. "Welcome to the underworld, sacred mother," he murmured. "You'll regret this kindness. Or become its queen." The doors opened. Cleopatra, still holding Lee Dong-wook's hand, stepped off into a world where danger tasted like salvation, and the most terrifying man she'd ever met looked at her like something precious, something worth keeping. The platform was chaos controlled by silence. Men in black suits materialized from shadows, forming a perimeter around them before Cleopatra's feet fully touched concrete. She counted 6, then stopped counting. Their faces were blank, professional, deadly. They moved like synchronized predators, and she was suddenly, viscerally aware that she'd stepped off that train holding the hand of someone far more dangerous than she'd imagined. Dong-wook's grip tightened on her hand as they walked. The triplets were being carried by 3 men who moved with surprising gentleness, cradling the sleeping infants like precious cargo, which, Cleopatra realized with growing unease, they absolutely were. A black SUV waited, engine purring. Dong-wook guided her inside with a hand on her lower back, possessive, protective, proprietary. The leather interior smelled new and expensive. The windows were tinted so dark the outside world disappeared. They pulled away from the station, and only then did he release her hand. "Your price," he said, settling back into the seat. His composure had returned, that icy control sliding back into place like armor. "Name it." Cleopatra turned to face him, her natural hair still escaping its tie, her simple clothes rumpled from holding 3 babies. She looked nothing like someone who belonged in this world of tinted windows and armed escorts. "I don't have a price." His eyes narrowed. "Everyone has a price. Not for this." She glanced at the sleeping triplets secured in car seats behind them. "I didn't do it for money. I did it because they needed me. Because," her voice caught, "because I needed them to live." Something shifted in his expression. Confusion, maybe. In his world, everything was transactional. Power for loyalty, money for silence, blood for blood. But she was offering him something outside that economy, and he didn't know how to categorize it. "You don't understand what you've done," he said quietly, dangerously. "The act you performed nursing my sons, it's not just charity in my culture. It's sacred, binding. I'm a nurse. It was medical intervention." "No." He leaned forward, and the space between them compressed with sudden intensity. "You are Aomonigayam now, sacred mother. The woman who gives life to the heirs becomes their mother in every way that matters. And that makes you," he paused, his dark eyes holding hers with magnetic force. "That makes you mine." Cleopatra's heart hammered against her ribs. "I don't belong to anyone. You misunderstand." His voice dropped lower, intimate and threatening at once. "I am Lee Dong-wook. They call me the Reaper. I control the Juk Amjo Death's Grip Syndicate. I own territories from Seoul to Los Angeles. I've built an empire on violence and fear." He moved closer, and she smelled his cologne mixed with something darker. "And you just tied yourself to that empire by nursing my children. You're not my possession, Cleopatra Jones. You're my queen, whether you want to be or not." The words hung between them like a blade. "That's insane," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "That's tradition. That's survival." He pulled out his phone, showing her a photo, a Korean man with cold eyes and a cruel smile. "This is Han Jun, my rival. He's been waiting for me to show weakness, and now I have 3 motherless sons, and the woman who saved them." His thumb traced the edge of the phone. "He will come for you, to hurt me, to leverage my children, and I will not allow that." Cleopatra looked at the photo, then at the sleeping babies, then back at Dong-wook. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying you come with me, to my estate in Virginia, 1 week, until the babies are stabilized and I've secured the territorial agreement that will protect them." His eyes bored into hers. 1 week under my protection, then you can return to your life. And if I refuse?" His jaw tightened. "Then Han Jun will find you within 48 hours. He has resources. He has no mercy. And he will use you to destroy everything I've built and everyone I love." She wanted to call him paranoid, wanted to dismiss this as mobster theatrics, but the cold certainty in his voice, the armed men outside, the way he'd surrendered his son to her on that train, all of it spoke to a reality she couldn't deny. 1 week, she said finally. "As a nurse, to make sure they're healthy and feeding properly, That's all. Something flickered in his eyes, respect. Maybe, or the beginning of fascination. That's all, he agreed. But the way he said it felt like a lie they were both pretending to believe. He extended his hand again. Do we have an agreement? Sacred Mother? Cleopatra looked at his hand, elegant, scarred at the knuckles, capable of violence and tenderness both. She thought of Grace, of 6 months of emptiness, of 3 babies who'd looked at her with desperate need. She shook his hand. 1 week, professional, nothing more. His fingers closed around hers, warm and sure, and she felt the tremor of something dangerous between them. Of course, he murmured, his thumb brushing across her pulse point. Nothing more, but the heat in his eyes promised everything. The estate rose from the Virginia darkness like a fortress disguised as art. High stone walls topped with subtle security cameras, wrought iron gates that whispered open at their approach. The mansion itself was a study in contradictions, modern glass and steel wrapped around traditional Korean architecture, all dark wood beams and curved roof lines that seemed to bow under the weight of secrets. Cleopatra counted 12 armed men as they drove through the grounds, maybe more in the shadows. Inside, the foyer stole her breath. Polished ebony floors reflected low amber lighting from silk-shaded lamps. Dark wood panels carved with intricate Korean designs climbed the walls. Everything smelled of sandalwood and wealth and controlled power. It was beautiful and suffocating in equal measure. Your suite is on the 3rd floor, Dong-wook said, his hand returning to her lower back as he guided her toward a sweeping staircase. The nursery is adjacent. You'll have everything you need. And what I don't need? The question escaped before she could stop it. His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. You'll have that too. Her room was obscene in its luxury. A 4-poster bed draped in silk the color of midnight, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured gardens lit by subtle ground lights, a bathroom of black marble and gold fixtures, clothes already hanging in the closet, her size exactly, expensive labels she'd never afford. How did you? I'm thorough, Cleopatra Jones. He stood in the doorway, backlit and dangerous. The babies are next door. Rest tonight. Tomorrow your work begins. He left before she could respond, the door clicking shut with quiet finality. Cleopatra sank onto the bed, her worn denim jacket suddenly feeling like a costume from another life. She'd walked off that train 6 hours ago. Now she was living in a mobster's mansion, wearing borrowed clothes, bound to 3 motherless babies by an ancient tradition she didn't fully understand, and attracted to a man who terrified her. The routine established itself with clinical precision. Dawn broke, and Cleopatra woke to Jae-hoon's soft cries through the monitoring system. She fed him in the nursery, a room of soft grays and warm wood, everything top of the line and sterile in its perfection. Then Jae-min, then Jae-kyung. Her body responded with reliable efficiency, milk flowing freely now, her breasts no longer aching with unused purpose. And Dong-wook watched. He was always there, leaning against the doorframe as she burped Jae-min, sitting in the corner chair while she changed Jae-kyung. His presence was constant, magnetic, suffocating. Those dark eyes tracked her every movement, clinical and hungry at once. You don't need to supervise, Mr. Lee, she said on the second morning, keeping her voice professional as she rocked Jae-hoon. I'm ensuring their care meets my standards. His accent wrapped around the words like silk. And does it? You exceed every expectation, Cleopatra Jones. The way he said her full name with that slight pause, that possession made her skin flush. Which makes you even more valuable, and more vulnerable. She hated how her body responded to his voice, hated the way her pulse jumped when he entered a room. He was a killer, a crime lord, a man who'd built an empire on violence, but she kept seeing glimpses of something else. The way his jaw softened when Jae-kyung grabbed his finger, how his voice dropped to barely a whisper when singing Korean lullabies, the exhaustion that lined his eyes when he thought no one was watching, and that scent sharp cologne cutting through baby powder that somehow made her feel safe and threatened simultaneously. On the 3rd night, her phone rang. Her sister, calling from Detroit. Cleo, where are you? You were supposed to be home 2 days ago. I'm fine. Something came up. A job opportunity. I'll explain when. The call disconnected. Cleopatra stared at her screen, then slowly turned. Dong-wook stood in her doorway, phone in hand, expression unreadable. You cut my call. I monitored your call, he corrected. There's a difference. Fury ignited in her chest. You have no right. I have every right. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The room suddenly felt smaller. You're under my protection. That means I control what information leaves this estate. Who knows you're here? What they know. He moved closer, and she caught that scent again, sandalwood and danger. Your sister doesn't need to know about the Juk Aumjo, about Hanjun, about the target on your back. So I'm a prisoner. You're protected. His eyes held hers, intense and unyielding. There's a difference. Is there? She stood, meeting his gaze despite the height difference. You monitor my calls, control my movements, watch me constantly. That sounds like a cage, Mr. Lee. Something flickered across his face. Respect, irritation, desire. A gilded cage is still safer than freedom when there are wolves at the gates. Cleopatra Jones. They stood too close. Close enough that she could see the fine lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his sharp jaw, the way his chest rose and fell with controlled breathing. I agreed to 1 week, she said quietly. To help your sons, not to be owned. No one owns you. His voice dropped to something rough, intimate. But while you're here, while you carry the title of Aomoni Gaem, you exist in my world, under my rules, in my protection. His hand rose slowly, giving her time to pull away, before his fingers traced her jawline with devastating gentleness. And in my debt, her breath caught. What debt? You saved my sons. That binds you to me in ways you don't yet understand. His thumb brushed across her lower lip, and heat flooded through her. 4 more days, Sacred Mother. Then we'll see if you still want to leave. He dropped his hand and walked out, leaving her standing in that luxurious room, heart racing, skin burning where he'd touched her. 4 more days in this gilded cage with a man who looked at her like she was salvation and temptation both. 4 more days before she'd have to decide if she was strong enough to walk away. Cleopatra woke to the weight of being watched. Her neck ached from the awkward angle she'd fallen asleep in the nursery rocking chair. Jaemin still cradled against her chest. The baby's warm weight rose and fell with peaceful breathing. Moonlight streamed through the window, painting everything silver and shadow. And Dong-wook stood in the doorway. He was different in the darkness. His suit jacket was gone, white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars she'd never noticed. His hair fell across his forehead, no longer styled with precision, and his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, held something raw and unguarded. He looked devastated. Mr. Lee. Her voice came out rough with sleep. Is something wrong? He didn't answer immediately, just stared at her holding his son, and she watched his throat work as he swallowed. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Hana used to fall asleep like that, in that exact chair, holding Jaemin. He stepped inside, moving with careful quiet. I'd find her at 3 a.m, exhausted, but refusing to put him down. She said she could feel his heartbeat against hers, that it made her feel alive. Cleopatra's chest tightened. This wasn't the Reaper speaking. This was a man drowning in grief. She sounds like she loved them deeply. She died loving them. His jaw clenched. The pregnancy destroyed her immune system. The doctors warned us. 3 babies at once. It was too much for her body. But she refused to terminate, refused to reduce. She said she'd rather die than choose between them. He moved to the window, his silhouette sharp against moonlight. So she did. She gave them life and took her last breath 7 days later. The confession hung in the air like smoke. I'm sorry, Cleopatra whispered. I built an empire on control, on eliminating threats before they become problems. But I couldn't save her. Couldn't protect her from her own body. His voice cracked. And I can't even feed the children she died to give me. Cleopatra carefully stood, settling Jaemin in his crib before approaching Dong-wook. He didn't turn, just kept staring into the darkness beyond the window. Up close, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight tremor in his hands. You kept them alive, she said softly. You got them to me. That's not failure. It feels like it. His voice was raw, stripped of all armor. Every day they cried. I heard her voice asking me why I couldn't do this one simple thing. Why the Reaper can kill but can't comfort. Why I'm so goddamn useless without her. A single tear tracked down his cheek. Cleopatra's hand moved before her mind could stop it. She reached up, her brown fingers gentle against his sharp cheekbone, and wiped the tear away. The intimacy of the gesture shocked them both. Dong-wook's eyes snapped to hers, dark and burning with something dangerous. Don't, he said, but his hand rose to cover hers, pressing her palm against his face. Don't be kind to me, Cleopatra Jones. I don't deserve it. Everyone deserves kindness, she whispered. Not me. But he didn't release her hand. Instead, his thumb traced circles on her wrist, finding her pulse. I've killed 17 men, ordered the deaths of dozens more. I've built my empire on blood and fear, and now you stand here, in my home, feeding my children, looking at me like I'm— His voice broke. Like I'm salvageable. Maybe you are. He pulled her closer with sudden, desperate intensity. Not aggressive, but needy. His forehead dropped to hers, their breaths mingling in the small space between them. She could smell sandalwood and exhaustion, feel the tremor running through his controlled exterior. The Amoni Geum, he murmured, his lips so close to hers she felt the words. I told you it was tradition. Obligation. But that's a lie. His hand slid to cup her face, reverent and possessive at once. From the moment you nursed Jaehoon, I felt something I haven't felt since Hana died. Peace. Like maybe I could be something other than the Reaper. Like maybe I could be just a man. Cleopatra's heart hammered against her ribs. Mr. Lee. Dong-wook. His thumb traced her lower lip. Say my name. Just once. Let me hear it without the armor. Dong-wook. The syllables felt foreign and intimate on her tongue. His eyes closed like she'd touched something sacred. Again. Dong-wook. He shuddered, and when his eyes opened, they burned with naked desire and desperate vulnerability. I want to kiss you. I want to pull you against me and forget everything except how you feel. But I can't, because you're not here by choice. You're here because I demanded it, because I trapped you in my world, his voice roughened. And I won't take what isn't freely given. The confession was more intimate than any kiss. Cleopatra's hand slid from his face to his chest, feeling his heart hammer beneath her palm. What if— A sharp knock shattered the moment. Kang's voice urgent through the door. Sir, we have movement at the north gate. Unknown vehicle. Hanjun's signature. Dong-wook's entire demeanor shifted. The vulnerable man disappeared, replaced by the Reaper in an instant. He stepped back, and Cleopatra felt the loss of his warmth like a physical blow. Lock down the estate, he commanded, his voice ice. Triple the guards on this floor. No one gets near the nursery. Yes, sir. Dong-wook turned back to Cleopatra, and she saw both men warring in his expression, the killer and the father, the monster and the man. Stay here. Don't leave this floor. He moved toward the door, then stopped. 3 more days, Cleopatra Jones. 3 more days until the territorial meeting. Then this ends. But the way he looked at her promised it was only beginning. 7 days collapsed into 7 hours. Cleopatra woke on the final morning to find her bags packed, a car idling in the circular drive, and Dong-wook standing in her doorway with his armor fully restored. Black suit, perfect hair, cold eyes. The Reaper, not the man who'd pressed his forehead to hers and whispered her name like a prayer. The car will take you to Union Station, he said without preamble. First-class ticket to Detroit. 20,000 deposited in your account for your time. You leave in 1 hour. She sat up slowly, her natural curls wild from sleep, wearing one of the silk nightgowns that had appeared in her closet. The babies will be fine. I've arranged for a wet nurse, Korean, experienced. She arrives this afternoon. Something cold settled in Cleopatra's chest. You're replacing me. I'm protecting you. His voice was controlled, but she heard the strain beneath. The meeting with Hanjun is tonight. It's going to be dangerous, and I won't have you here when it happens. So you're just dismissing me? After a week of calling me Sacred Mother? After telling me I'm bound to them? His jaw tightened. The binding ends when you walk out that door. You go back to your life. I go back to mine. Clean break. That's not how this works. She stood, moving toward him with fury igniting in her veins. You don't get to pull me into your world, make me love those boys, and then shove money at me like you're what? He stepped inside, kicking the door shut behind him. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Say it, Cleopatra Jones. Like you're a transaction? Because that's exactly what this was supposed to be. 1 week. Professional. Your words. That was before. She stopped, but he was already moving closer. Before what? His voice dropped dangerously low. Before you started looking at me like I'm more than a monster? Before I started needing to see you every morning just to remember how to breathe? Before we both crossed lines we swore we wouldn't? The air between them crackled with tension. You need to leave, he said, but his body betrayed him, moving closer instead of backing away. Hanjun is coming, and if he finds you here, if he learns what you've become to me, he will use you to destroy everything. I can't. His control cracked. I won't let him touch you. Then let me stay until it's over. Until you're safe. No. Why? She closed the remaining distance between them, her brown eyes blazing up at his dark ones. Because you're afraid I'll see the real you? The Reaper in action? I've already seen him, Dong-wook, and I'm still standing here. Hearing his name from her lips broke something in him. You don't understand what you're asking. His hands rose to frame her face, trembling with restraint. If you stay, if anything happens to you, I will burn this entire city to ash. I will become the monster everyone thinks I am, and it will be because of you. Then don't let anything happen to me. Her hands found his chest, feeling his heart thunder beneath expensive fabric. Don't send me away like I mean nothing when we both know. He kissed her. One moment they were arguing, the next his mouth was on hers, desperate, consuming, inevitable. His hands tangled in her curls, tilting her head back as he devoured her with the same intensity he applied to everything. Control shattering into raw need. Cleopatra gasped against his lips, and he took the opening, deepening the kiss until she couldn't tell where she ended, and he began. He tasted like coffee and danger, and something darker, possession and desperation mixed into intoxicating heat. Her fingers clutched his shirt, pulling him closer, and he growled low in his throat. The sound vibrated through her entire body, igniting something primal and reckless. His hands slid down her sides, spanning her waist, pulling her flush against him until she felt every hard line of muscle, every tremor of restraint breaking. Cleopatra. Her name was a rough prayer against her lips. We can't. We already are. He kissed her again, slower this time but no less intense. His thumb traced the curve of her jaw, her throat, the rapid pulse at the base of her neck. She felt him memorizing her, claiming her with every touch. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead dropped to hers. This changes everything, he whispered. I know. If I do this, if I let myself want you, there's no going back. You become mine in every way, not just sacred mother, not just the woman who saved my sons, mine. The possessiveness should have terrified her. Instead, it made her blood sing. Then make sure you come back from that meeting, she said fiercely. Because I'm not leaving until you do. He pulled back, studying her face with those dark, burning eyes. Then he kissed her forehead with devastating tenderness. Stay in this room. Don't open the door for anyone but Kang. Promise me. I promise. If something goes wrong, if you hear anything, there's a panic room behind the bookshelf. Code is 0622, Grace's birthday. Her breath caught. He'd remembered. He'd cared enough to remember. Dong-wook stepped back, and she watched the Reaper slide back into place, cold, controlled, lethal. But before he reached the door, he turned one last time. When this is over, he said quietly, we're going to finish this conversation, and you're going to tell me if you want to stay. Not for the boys, for me. Then he was gone, leaving her standing in that luxurious room, lips swollen, heart racing, knowing she'd just crossed a line that would either save them both or destroy everything. The silence was wrong. Cleopatra stood at her window, watching darkness settle over the estate like a shroud. No birds, no wind, just oppressive, suffocating quiet that made her skin crawl. She'd felt this before in the ER, right before a trauma patient coded. The body's knowledge that something terrible was coming. She checked her phone. 9:47 p.m. Dong-wook had been gone for 3 hours. Her feet carried her to the nursery before conscious thought caught up. The triplets slept peacefully in their cribs, Jae-hoon with his fist curled near his face, Jae-min sprawled like a starfish, Jae-kyung making soft sucking motions in his sleep. 7 days ago, they'd been starving, desperate, dying. Now they were healthy, thriving, beautiful. Her success. Her purpose. Her reason for being here. Or was it? She touched her lips, still feeling the phantom pressure of Dong-wook's kiss. The way he'd looked at her like she was oxygen and he was drowning. The raw need in his voice when he'd said times mine asterisk. The explosion shattered everything. The blast wave hit like a physical wall, throwing Cleopatra backward into the changing table. Glass exploded inward from the windows. The floor buckled. Alarms shrieked through the estate, high-pitched and panicked. Emergency lighting kicked on, bathing everything in hellish red. The babies screamed. Cleopatra's ER training overrode shock. She was moving before the ringing in her ears stopped, her body operating on pure adrenaline and muscle memory. Triage, assess, act. Jae-hoon first scooped from his crib, checked for injuries, wrapped tight against her chest. Then Jae-min. Then Jae-kyung. 3 babies, 3 bundles of terrified humanity pressed against her as gunfire erupted somewhere below. Kang! She screamed, but no answer came. Think. The panic room, but the bookshelf was across the hall, and she could hear boots pounding up the stairs. Heavy, multiple sets. Not Dong-wook's men, they moved with silent precision. These were invaders. Her eyes landed on the laundry hamper in the corner. Industrial-sized, wicker, innocent. She moved with desperate efficiency, pulling out blankets and creating a nest at the bottom. Jaehoon went in first, then Jaemin, then Jaekyung on top. She covered them with soft receiving blankets, praying they'd stay quiet, praying the darkness would keep them hidden. "Shh, my loves," she whispered, tears streaming down her brown cheeks. "Mama's here. I won't let them hurt you." The door exploded inward. 5 men poured through, weapons drawn, faces covered. And behind them, walking with leisurely cruelty, came Hanjun. He was beautiful in the way poisonous things are: sharp features, cold smile, expensive suit unmarred by violence. His eyes found her immediately, and recognition sparked with vicious pleasure. The black mother who saved his children. His English was perfect, accent barely noticeable. The Reaper's weakness. "I've been so curious about you, Cleopatra Jones." She positioned herself between him and the hamper, her body a shield. "You need to leave. Now." He laughed a sound like breaking glass. "Bold. I like that. Do you know what Aomonigam means in our world? It means Dongwook can never touch another woman without betraying his son's mother. It means you're not just a wet nurse, darling. You're his times queen asterisk." He stepped closer, and she smelled cologne and gunpowder. "And queens are such valuable leverage. He'll kill you for this. He'll times try asterisk." Hanjun's smile widened. "But first he'll watch me hurt what he values most. His children, their precious mother. And then, when he's broken completely, I'll take everything he's built and burn it to ash." One of his men moved toward the cribs now empty. "Where are the babies?" Hanjun's voice dropped to something lethal. "Safe. Somewhere you'll never find them." His hand shot out, grabbing her throat with practiced cruelty. Not enough to choke, but enough to terrify. "Tell me, or I start breaking fingers until you do." "Go to hell." He raised his gun, pressing the barrel against her temple. Cold steel kissed her skin, and Cleopatra felt her heartbeat thunder against the metal. This was it. This was how she'd die, protecting 3 babies who weren't hers, for a man who'd stolen her heart in 7 impossible days. But at least Grace would understand. The door exploded inward again. Dongwook was a nightmare made flesh. Blood streaked his face from a gash above his eyebrow. His suit was torn, revealing Kevlar underneath, and his eyes, those dark, cold eyes, burned with primal, apocalyptic fury. He took in the scene in a microsecond. Hanjun's hand on Cleopatra's throat, the gun to her head, the empty cribs, and something in him that had been barely contained finally, catastrophically times broke asterisk. "Let her go." Each word was a death sentence. Hanjun's smile never wavered. "Or what, Reaper? You'll kill me? You're outnumbered 5 to 1. And the second you move, I put a bullet in your queen's beautiful head. Then you die immediately after. And your entire bloodline follows within the week." Dongwook's voice was arctic calm, masking volcanic rage. "I will hunt every person you've ever loved, every associate, every friend, every distant cousin. I will erase your family's name from history. And I will make sure they know, in their final moments, that it was because you touched her." The temperature in the room plummeted. Hanjun's smile faltered. Because they both knew, everyone in the underworld knew, that the Reaper didn't make empty threats. "You'd start a war," Hanjun said slowly. "For a woman you've known a week? I'd end the world." Dongwook's gun rose with lethal precision. "Try me." Cleopatra felt Hanjun's grip tighten on her throat, felt his finger shift on the trigger, felt the moment teetering between salvation and slaughter. And then she heard it, the soft, unmistakable sound of Jaekyung whimpering from the hamper. Hanjun's eyes cut toward the sound. Everything happened at once. Dongwook fired. Hanjun shoved Cleopatra forward as a shield. She twisted, throwing herself sideways. The bullet meant for Hanjun's head caught his shoulder instead. He stumbled, and his men opened fire. Cleopatra hit the ground, covering her head as the nursery erupted into chaos. Gunfire, screaming, the meaty sound of fists hitting flesh. She crawled toward the hamper, toward the babies, her only thought protecting them from the violence exploding around her. Strong hands grabbed her waist, hauling her up. She fought instinctively until she smelled sandalwood and blood. "I've got you," Dongwook growled in her ear. "I've got you." He positioned himself between her and the remaining men, his body a wall of muscle and fury, and Cleopatra realized with crystal clarity that this man, this killer, this monster, this Reaper, would die before letting anyone hurt her. The last man fell. Dongwook turned, blood spattered and breathing hard, and their eyes met across the destroyed nursery. "The boys?" His voice cracked on the question. "Safe." The hamper. He was moving before she finished, dropping to his knees beside the wicker basket. His hands, those killer's hands, were infinitely gentle as he pulled back the blankets, revealing 3 crying but unharmed babies. The sound he made was pure, broken relief. Hanjun wasn't finished. Blood poured from his shoulder wound, but he was laughing, a wet, vicious sound that echoed off the destroyed nursery walls. He'd crawled backward until his spine hit the wall, and now his uninjured hand held something that made Cleopatra's blood turn to ice. A detonator. "You think you've won, Reaper?" He coughed, spitting crimson. "I have charges placed throughout this estate. Enough C4 to level 3 city blocks. And if my heart stops, if I even think you're going to kill me, this entire place becomes a crater." Dong-wook froze, his gun still trained on Hanjun's skull. His jaw worked, calculating odds, weighing options. Cleopatra could see the Reaper's mind spinning through scenarios, each one ending in blood. "You're bluffing," Dong-wook said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Hanjun's thumb hovered over the button. "Your men found 3 charges. I placed 12. Want to test me? Want to see if your precious queen and those bastard children survive the blast?" The triplets wailed from the hamper. The sound cut through everything, 3 innocent voices crying for protection they couldn't provide themselves. Cleopatra watched Dong-wook's face. Watched the man she'd come to know, the devoted father. The wounded soul war with the monster he'd built himself into. The Reaper would take the shot, would gamble that Hanjun was lying, would choose elimination over negotiation. But the father couldn't risk it. "What do you want?" The words cost him everything. Hanjun's smile was triumphant. "Everything. Your territory, your contracts, your entire American operation. The Jukyum-jo becomes mine. You become nothing." He leaned forward despite the pain. "And you walk away, powerless, broken, watching me build an empire on the ashes of yours. Done." The word came instantly, without hesitation. Cleopatra's breath caught. Hanjun looked genuinely shocked. "Just like that? You'd give up everything you've built? Your legacy? Your power?" Dong-wook lowered his gun slowly, his dark eyes never leaving Hanjun's face. "I will give you everything. My territory, the contracts, the American operation. The Jukyum-jo is yours. All of it. Every asset, every connection, every dollar." His voice was steel wrapped in silk. "In exchange, you let them go. You let her walk out of here with my sons. You never come near them again, and you forget they ever existed. You're serious?" Hanjun was staring at him like he'd grown a second head. The Reaper would trade his empire for a woman and 3 babies? Without hesitation. The confession hung in the air like a benediction. Hanjun started laughing again, but this time it sounded hollow. "You're pathetic, weak. Everything our fathers warned us against becoming." He struggled to his feet, detonator still clutched in his bloody hand. "Fine, I accept. Your empire for their lives. But know this. Dong-wook history will remember you as the man who gave up everything for a whore and 3. Dong-wook moved with liquid violence. One moment he was still. The next his fist connected with Hanjun's jaw with enough force to snap his head sideways. The detonator flew from his hand, skittering across the floor. Cleopatra lunged, snatching it before Hanjun could recover. And then Dong-wook was on him, primal, apocalyptic fury unleashed. His fists were sledgehammers, each blow precise and devastating. The sound was sickening, bone meeting flesh, cartilage cracking, blood spattering across expensive hardwood. Hanjun tried to fight back, but he was outmatched. The Reaper wasn't just stronger, he was motivated by something Hanjun couldn't comprehend. Every punch carried the weight of 7 days watching Cleopatra nurse his sons. Every strike held the memory of her lips against his. Every blow was fueled by the knowledge that this man had threatened the only light he'd found in years of darkness. He fought like a man possessed, like a father protecting his family, like a lover defending his queen. When Hanjun finally stopped moving, Dong-wook pulled his gun with shaking hands. He pressed the barrel against Hanjun's temple, his finger curling around the trigger. His face was a mask of cold fury, the Reaper at his most lethal. "Any last words?" His voice was ice over molten rage. "Dong-wook, stop." Cleopatra's scream cut through the red haze. She stepped forward, still clutching the detonator, her brown skin pale with fear and determination. The triplets had quieted in the hamper, as if sensing the weight of this moment. "Don't do this," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Please, don't become this. He threatened you, threatened my sons. He deserves death? Maybe." She moved closer, careful and steady. "But if you pull that trigger, this never ends. There will always be another Hanjun, another rival, another threat, another reason to kill." Tears streamed down her face. "You said you wanted to be more than the Reaper. Prove it. Choose to be more. His finger trembled on the trigger. He'll come back. He'll never stop hunting us. Then we run. We disappear. We build something new. She was close enough now to touch his shoulder. But we do it as people trying to be better, not monsters perpetuating the cycle. Choose the man, Dong-wook. Choose us. Choose love over this. He looked at her, really looked. At her tear-stained face, her fierce determination, the way she stood between him and his darkest impulses. Then his gaze shifted to the hamper, where 3 tiny lives depended on what he did next. The darkness of his past, or the light of his future. The Reaper, or just a man. With a guttural roar of pure anguish, he slammed the gun down, not pulling the trigger, but smashing the weapon against the floor with enough force to crack the grip. The sound echoed like thunder. He stood slowly, chest heaving, blood and tears mixing on his face. "The Juk Am Jo is dissolved," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute finality. "The contracts are void. The territories are released. I am done." He looked down at Hanjun's battered form. "Take it all. Build your empire. But if you ever come near my family again, I will forget I chose mercy today." He turned away from his defeated rival and walked straight to Cleopatra. His hands framed her face with devastating gentleness, thumbs wiping away her tears. "I choose you," he whispered. "I choose them. I choose light over darkness. I choose us." And then he kissed her, soft and desperate and full of promise. They left before sunrise. Kang had 3 vehicles waiting, unmarked, untraceable, engines already running. Dong-wook carried Jae-hoon and Jae-min while Cleopatra held Jae-kyung against her chest. They moved through the destroyed estate like ghosts, stepping over debris and blood, leaving behind everything he'd built. Hanjun was gone. His men had dragged him away while Dong-wook kissed Cleopatra, choosing love over vengeance. The empire would change hands by morning. The Reaper would become a ghost story, and Lee Dong-wook would become just a man. "Where are we going?" Cleopatra asked as they settled into the middle vehicle. Dong-wook's hand found hers in the darkness. "Anywhere but here. Everywhere that's safe. Wherever you want." She looked at him, this man who'd traded everything for her, for 3 babies, for the possibility of redemption. His face was bruised, his suit destroyed, his hands still trembling from the choice he'd made, and he'd never looked more beautiful. "Home," she whispered. "Let's go home." 1 year later, home was a quiet suburb in Atlanta, tree-lined streets, neighbors who waved, a backyard with a sandbox that saw more action than any battlefield Dong-wook had ever commanded. The house was modest by his former standards. 3 bedrooms, a kitchen that smelled like Cleopatra's cooking, walls covered in crayon drawings and family photos. No armed guards, no surveillance, no empire to protect, just peace. Cleopatra stood at the kitchen window, watching Dong-wook in the backyard with the triplets. They were walking, now stumbling, really chasing each other with the determined chaos only toddlers could achieve. Jae-hoon was trying to climb into the sandbox. Jae-min had discovered the garden hose, and Jae-kyung was attempting to eat a dandelion. And Dong-wook, former Reaper, former crime lord, former monster, was laughing. The sound still took her breath away. Pure, unguarded joy from a man who'd lived in shadows so long he'd forgotten what light felt like. She touched the simple gold band on her finger. They'd married 3 months ago in a small ceremony, no guests, just them and 3 impatient toddlers. Dong-wook had cried when she'd said, "I do," and she'd realized he'd never believed he deserved this. Redemption, family, love. He looked up then, catching her watching through the window. His smile softened into something intimate and knowing. He said something to the boys, then walked toward the house with that same lethal grace now tempered by diaper bags and sleepless nights. The back door opened, and he pulled her into his arms. He smelled like sunscreen and grass and home. "They're getting big," she murmured against his chest. "They're getting wild." His lips brushed her temple. Jaemin tried to eat a worm. That's very on-brand for him. He laughed again, and she felt the vibration through her entire body. His security consulting firm was thriving. Legitimate work, legitimate money, using his strategic mind for protection instead of destruction. They weren't wealthy anymore, not by his old standards, but they were rich in ways that mattered. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Giving it all up?" Dong-wook pulled back to look at her, his dark eyes holding hers with absolute certainty. "I didn't give it all up. I traded a kingdom built on blood for an empire built on love." His hand cupped her face. "I'd make that choice 1,000 times over. Even on the hard days, when Jae-hoon won't sleep and Jae-min is colicky and Jae-kyung decides 3 a.m. is party time. Especially on those days." He kissed her softly. Because I get to face them with you. Because I'm not the Reaper anymore. I'm just a man who got impossibly lucky when a beautiful nurse walked into my cabin and saved more than my sons. Cleopatra's eyes filled with tears. I walked onto that train broken, empty, convinced I'd never feel whole again after losing Grace. And now? Now I understand. She smiled through her tears. Grace prepared me for them. For you. She taught me how to love so completely that when you needed me, when they needed me, I knew exactly what to give. Her hand found his chest, feeling his heartbeat. I was supposed to save your sons that day, so they could save me right back. Outside, the triplets were calling for them, 3 little voices demanding attention, snacks, more playtime, the soundtrack of their new life. Dongwook kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips. Ready to face the chaos, Mrs. Lee. With you? Always. They walked back outside together, hand in hand, into the golden afternoon light. The boys rushed toward them, Jae-hoon grabbing his father's leg, Jae-min reaching for Cleopatra, Jae-kyung doing both. A tangle of limbs and laughter and love. Cleopatra looked at Dongwook over their sons' heads and saw her future reflected in his eyes. More children, maybe. More laughter. More ordinary, extraordinary days. More chances to choose light over darkness. More of this beautiful, chaotic, perfect life they'd built from the ashes of his old world. She touched her stomach briefly, a secret she'd tell him tonight, when the boys were asleep and they had stolen moments in the darkness. New life growing, their family expanding. Home. Dongwook caught the gesture, and his eyes widened with understanding and wonder. His smile was incandescent. Really? He mouthed. She nodded. He swept her into his arms right there in the backyard, spinning her while the triplets cheered. And Cleopatra Jones, former broken nurse, sacred mother, queen of a reformed Reaper, finally understood what victory looked like. It looked like this. Messy, loud, imperfect, beautiful. It looked like love. Thank you for listening to The Korean Mafia Boss Triplets Kept Crying in the Train Until the Black Single Mom Did the Unthinkable. Did Lee Dong-wook make the right choice when he gave up his empire for love? Tell us what you thought. If you loved this story of forbidden salvation, obsession, and ultimate redemption, be sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next dangerous love story from our dark romance collection. Until next time, keep the shadows close.